All right. So as Des mentioned, this is going to be recorded. We'll post it to our website as we typically do. This is a Cascade Natural Gas Conservation Advisory Group meeting. It's our Q2 CAG meeting. Thanks everyone for your interest as always. I really appreciate it. It's always great to see such a great attendance for our meetings. I'm going to start off with a safety moment so I don't forget. Carrie's always really good about reminding me, and I was going to jump ahead of the game this time. My safety moment. So it's spring, so let's make sure we have a lot of spring weather awareness. I know last week we had almost 3 feet of snow in some of our territory over in Bismarck. So season's changeable. We're excited about the sunshine, warmer weather, longer days, but don't forget torrential downpours, flooding, hail, winds, and snowstorms. Watch the roads, be aware of thunderstorms, flooding. Again, don't drive through the water. We had that pretty close to our office last year in Bellingham. Watch for the wind and be sure to check the weather reports when you're traveling, and of course be prepared. If you're going over the passes, have all sorts of blankets and chains if needed and everything. But summer's coming, so we'll hold out for that. In the meantime, just be prepared. All right, so from my safety moment, we'll go ahead and just do an introduction and roll call and see who's on the call today. I think I will remind everyone, if you could please be on mute unless you're speaking. That'll help with some of that background noise that we have. And then if you'd like to be on video, please feel free. I'll probably pop in and out if I'm talking. I'll try to be on video. Otherwise, it does help with bandwidth. If you wanted to turn your video off, as I mentioned, we'll be recording and we will be posting that to our website, the link that we typically would. And I also have that link here on your agenda. If you'd like to, you can always just click on it and see the meeting notes from the last meeting. We'll go into that in a minute, but let's go ahead and do our our introductions roll call first. As I mentioned, I think everyone should probably know me, Monica. I manage our energy efficiency programs, and I'm just going to go down the list. This is interesting. It's not alphabetical today for me. For some reason, Sheila's showing up first. So Sheila, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Sheila McElhinney, Senior Conservation Analyst for Cascade Natural Gas Corporation. Thank you.
And I've got a phone number here. It's a 266 number. Is someone calling in from a cell phone?
Yeah, that might be me. This is Corey from Public Counsel.
Hi, Corey. Thanks so much for joining us. Amy.
Hey, this is Amy Wheelis with the Northwest Energy Coalition.
Thank you, Amy. I think Desiree, did you introduce yourself as well?
I did not. This is Desiree, and I'm from the Cascade Natural Gas Corporation, the Energy Efficiency, and I'm the Consumer Support Specialist, Conservation Support Specialist.
Lori, if you'd be so kind.
If I can get my microphone off. Good morning, this is Lori Blattner. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Energy Efficiency for Cascade, and just glad to see so many people on the phone. It's great to have you participate.
Carrie.
Good morning, everyone. Carrie Buren, Cascade Natural Gas Energy Efficiency Supervisor.
Brady, please.
Morning, Brady Day with TRC. We manage the Commercial Industrial Energy Efficiency Program for CNGC.
Thanks, Brady. Chris Fork.
Good morning. This is Chris Fork, one of the Energy Efficiency Analysts and the Outreach Coordinator for the Energy Efficiency Department of Cascade.
Thank you, Chris. Gil.
This is, can you hear me? Okay, sorry. This is Gil Peach, and I'm working for Forefront on this one, and we're doing work on low-income reduced rates.
Nice to have you, Gil. Thank you for joining us. And Mark Thompson.
Yeah, good morning, Monica and everyone. Thanks for having us. Like Gil said, we're currently doing some work for Cascade on low-income rate design, and we have done a number of projects that either touch on conservation or peripherally related to conservation. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you joining us. Ted McCammett.
Ted McCammett, Cascade Gas, Manager Energy Services.
Thanks, Ted. Devin.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Devin McGreal, Senior Resource Planning Economist with Cascade. Thanks for having me.
Taylor.
Good morning. This is Taylor Mead, and I am a Energy Efficiency Support Specialist for Cascade Natural Gas.
Heather.
Good morning. Heather Moline with Washington Utilities and Transportation Commission.
Thank you, Heather. And Jocelyn.
Good morning. I'm Jocelyn Moore, and I am also an Energy Efficiency Support Specialist with CNGC.
Mr. Parvinen.
Mike Parvinen with Regulatory Affairs for Cascade.
Thank you, Mike. Peter.
Yeah, good morning. Peter Crystalite. I am the manager for the natural gas portfolio at NIA.
Thanks, Peter. And Stephanie.
Good morning, Stephanie Reed, data entry for Cascade Natural Gas, the energy efficiency, and IGC.
Liz.
Hi there, Liz Reichart, Energy Policy Specialist at the Department of Commerce.
Thanks, Liz. Nice to see you. Mark Sellers-Vaughan.
Good morning. I'm Mark Sellers-Vaughan, Manager Supply Resource Planning with Cascade.
Thanks, Mark. Mr. Collins.
Good morning, everyone here. Sean Collins, Director of the Energy Project.
Good morning, Sean. And John.
Good morning, all. John Storvik with Cascade Natural Gas. I am an energy efficiency analyst.
Morning, John. Did I miss anybody?
It looks like there's a phone number 360-393-0443. I don't know who that might be.
Des, that's me. It's Sheila. I called in because the fidelity is better if I listen.
Okay.
So it's me.
All right. Well, again, thank you everybody for joining us. Great participation. We've got a lot to talk about as we always do, so I'll go ahead and jump in. We have our action items from the last meeting, the Q1 meeting. Just in brief, the action items were advisory group members were asked if there was interest in a subgroup just addressing the low-income portion of our programs, the weatherization programs. And we're asked to send a note to myself if you were interested. I know Heather Moline mentioned she was interested. I think Gil, you might have said you were interested, but I didn't get a whole lot of other feedback. So if anyone else is interested, please feel free to, again, forward me an email, let me know your specific interest. I'm not sure if we're going to jump off on this right now, but we will. We do have that planned for this year so that we have that separate subgroup directly relating to low-income program changes and updates and all that good stuff. One of the other action items was relating to our biennial conservation plan. Heather was going to confirm that final version. I read through it, made sure, and this wasn't the plan itself so much as the conditions documents. Excuse me, I should have clarified here. That's all passed through. It's completed now, and I did send a copy to the advisory group. We also had our tariff update. Members of the advisory group looked through that tariff for us, recommended some updates, and it did go through the commission, so it was effective. That tariff change was effective as of April 1st, which is exciting. We'll talk about that a little later in our agenda here. And then Peter from NIA was going to assist me with setting up some meetings, or at least connections with Energy Trust of Oregon, to address to look at how they address any savings they get from the NIA program, specifically through code. And Peter did follow up with me, I connected with Spencer from Energy Trust, and I've also spoken with Avista as well, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as far as how those NIA savings are being addressed. Those are the specific action items from the agenda from our meeting last quarter. I'm happy to also open that agenda if anyone would like me to, and kind of go through it again if there's anything specific. I'm not sure I necessarily need to do that unless there's any questions or comments. I'm happy to, but I don't want to waste time. So any specific preferences for me to open it and go through it? I'm not hearing a driving need, so I won't do it this time. But as you well know, the link's there on our website now. Feel free to click on it, and Des does a great job of providing the video, and there's the date stamps on that the meeting minutes. So you can go to the specific spot in the video and actually replay the video if you need to have a recap of what the discussion was like. So we also have on the website, we also have our Cascade energy efficiency reports are now available on our website as well, in alignment with our requirements for the conditions document. All of our reports and everything are going to be available online on our website specifically. So if you ever have any questions, comments, need assistance in finding anything, please let me know. We're happy to help make sure that that's publicly available. With that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and move to our quarterly update. And this is going to be myself and Brady. So no questions or anything about the availability of the reports or our past meeting before I jump into this, right? So I think we're going to start on the commercial highlights for this quarter. Brady, would you be so kind?
So the commercial industrial program finished Q1 with 31,241 therms, about 1/3 of the goal for the quarter. So fell quite a bit short of the planned goal. We do break up the quarterly goals based on trends. So we generally look at a 3-year running average. And we have seen a little bit of drop in Q1 and Q2 in the past couple of years, but a large Q3 Q1 and a semi-large Q2 3 years ago, kind of weighted that. So we were a little bit disappointed. We did have a lot of projects that we expected to close earlier in the quarter or in the quarter that did not, but have been moved to a little bit later in the year. I'll talk a little bit about that pipeline or forecast upcoming. But we also had, we've kind of made some adjustments to address the shortfall, which will include some ride-alongs for myself with the staff that is doing outreach. And I think a big part of that is just kind of that transition into more in-person visits with customers. It's, as you all know, been a lot of phone work and email work the past couple of years. And so as we transition and begin to build up that, we call it the floor of the prescriptive or standard measures, because as this program has succeeded in the past, it's continued to build year over year on standard measures. So that individual outreach is critical to building up that standard floor. So like I said, disappointing for us for Q1. On the bright side, we do have 300,000 therms already identified in projects that we do expect to close in 2022 for the remainder of the year. This is more than even last year. I think we were at 291,000 last year. So we're just a shade over 300,000 for the remainder of 2022 in projects that we've identified. Obviously, supply chain issues contributed to the shortfall in Q1 and certainly could contribute to some of these projects being pushed. That said, we're doing a really good job of handholding these projects and being in constant contact with customers for both custom and standard projects that we do or that we have identified and do expect to close in 2022. So the one potential challenge is that Q2, most of the projects that we've identified are expected to close in Q3 and Q4. So we do expect there to be another shortfall in Q2, but we are quite hopeful that the projects identified in Q3 and Q4, and then the outreach that we're doing now to continue to build that pipeline will add to projects in all 3 quarters that remain in this year. So I'll pause there before we kind of talk about community outreach to see if there are any questions or any specifics that I can assist with.
Maybe can I ask, is the supply chain issue, is it pretty much steady with what we've had for the last couple of months, or have we seen any easing on it on the commercial side?
Yeah, I think it's dramatically different. As you all know, well, as you may know, with the new tariffs that went into place on April 1st, fryers were one of the pieces of equipment that are no longer eligible for incentives. So any installs after April 1st, 2022, and I talked to so many restaurateurs and business owners that I'm literally hearing 16 weeks to 16 months on getting fryers. So that's not indicative of, I think, the industry as a whole. We have seen one really positive side of, well, I don't want to say it's a positive side of the supply chain issue, but there's been some consolidation of contractors over in the Tri-Cities and the Walla Walla area on the insulation side. Insulation was pretty heavily hit by supply chain issues, but because of that consolidation, it's not necessarily new owners per se, but joining a buying group that they can buy more in bulk and get the insulation more quickly because they're buying larger amounts should help alleviate what we've seen on the insulation side. But HVAC continues to be a challenge, and there has been a little bit of, I don't want to say alleviation of, I don't know if that's a word, but we've seen it a little bit on the HVAC side with supply chain challenges waning a little bit, but we're still hearing quite a bit from contractors, distributors that getting equipment is still a challenge. Any other questions on the numbers year to date? So we have begun a lot of different types of outreach. We would consider a lot of what we're doing as the kind of adaptive management that we, have always done, but really focused on beginning in 2020, continuing through 2021, and are pushing through 2022. So it includes kind of piloting new types of outreach and new opportunities for campaigns, and one of those is an audio streaming campaign. Thankfully, we were able to connect with the same group that did the video campaign with the residential side of CNGC's conservation program, and they have been great to work with. So we started an audio campaign on the 1st of April. We've had a lot of impressions. It's more of an awareness, a brand awareness campaign than necessarily a clicks on, clicks on the link that appears during the audio streaming. So this is going to be displayed in both English and Spanish throughout CNGC territory. We're essentially able to set that up for based on the zip codes and cities that are in CNGC territory, as well as trying to target business owners and business managers and that group. So we'll have more details on what we expect to see is a little bit of an increase in visits to the website as time goes on throughout this campaign, because we have just, like I said, just started it. Our tentative plan is to do a 2-month campaign and then take a little break, reassess, and then go back in for another 2-month campaign later in 2022. So we've had some really good, again, we just get the numbers of the listen through rate, and it's north of 97%. So it's been very successful. We've also started some new initiatives, including partnering with a distributor, a manufacturer who distributes to contractors throughout the state on radiant heating. The manufacturer is Space Ray, which is without a doubt the number one manufacturer that we have incentivized in the past in radiant heating. We've targeted radiant heating for a couple of different reasons. The biggest one being that it's one of the most efficient uses of HVAC equipment and servicing customers and servicing the space with heat output, but it's also a very good incentive for the customers. So we've kind of had a two-pronged approach on the radiant side. One is that connection or relationship with Space Ray. The second is that we have offered a new bundle temporarily for customers who both install radiant heating and add insulation to their building. So they will receive an additional 10%. It's something similar to what we did last year with the recovery plan, where we offered an additional 10% for customers who did 3 or more measures. So again, it's temporary. We've had a lot of interest in it. It's a really good conversation starter. We haven't had any projects yet, but that's not terribly surprising. We just kind of started advertising this, or promoting this, I should say, late in Q1 and here at the beginning of Q2. So any questions on that?
It's called out on our new incentive sheet too, isn't it?
Yes, correct.
Great. Yeah.
And Brady, this is Carrie. I think it's a very contemporary, timely offering as well, given the fact that it works so well with fresh air
Yes.
and the concerns with the COVID. So it's a nice fit for commercial customers with that in mind.
I agree, and there's so many markets that we can really target with this. We've targeted auto repair shops and places that have big bays. We've targeted manufacturing facilities, larger industrial customers. There's a really wide swath of customers that could potentially leverage and utilize this this technology, as well as this is one of those. Radiant heating is, in one sense, one of the oldest forms of heating, but with new technology and a new focus, I think we'll see it as much on the radiant or the residential side moving forward, but on the residential and commercial side, as new technology making it much more easy to install and get use out of radiant heating. So that's a really good point, Carrie. Thank you for calling that out. Heather?
Actually, I was going to ask a question of Monica, but now that Carrie mentioned that, can you tell me a little bit more about how radiant heating is better for indoor air quality?
So indoor air quality, I guess I don't know that it's necessarily better for indoor air quality. It is better in terms of adapting to the environment. So radiant heating, one of the best aspects of it, and we've worked with our engineer on, kind of spelling out what that looks like. It really adapts to and connects with the people that are in the facility. So it doesn't so much push the air around, but it also doesn't involve, with unit heaters where you have outflows and things like that. It doesn't, there's not as much of a need for, can't think of the word filters, but something else. So, Carrie, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but I do think that the efficiency of the technology makes it much more adaptable to most environments or a lot of environments. There's some applications where it's just not a fit.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, in my mental model, when you're using the radiant heat, the person or the objects in the room are the ones that absorb the warmth. And so you're not as so you're not as focused on trying to treat the air in the building, say. And so you can have air moving, open windows, open bays, and things like that, and still create comfort for the individuals indoors. So it helps indoors and even in some of these outdoor eating establishments. It helps people stay comfortable in spite of having more air moving through the environment.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. And this might be a question for Monica, or maybe for Brady. I have some memory of a list of potential pilots from Cascade's BCP, Biennial Conservation Plan. And I think one of them had something to do with radiant heat. Does anyone have this? Okay, go ahead.
Yep. No, you're right. These two initiatives that we're doing, the partnering with the distributor and then the bundling with insulation, are both pilot call outs that we had for 2022. So you're absolutely right. And they're not pilots in that they're new technologies per se, but it's just the way in which we're approaching the marketplace with that technology, and how we're trying to get into working with, particular contractors as well as, getting this technology out to customers. So.
Got it. Thank you.
So I think one of the other things that we're focused on for the remainder of 2022 is continued outreach to schools. So we've had schools have traditionally been a backbone of this program, but we've involved ourselves in a couple of new organizations. They're not new organizations, excuse me, but our participation in them is new, and that's WAMOA, which is the Washington Association of Maintenance and Operations folks. I can't think of the last A, but it's essentially the group that manages facilities for the individual schools and for the districts. So we've been attending mostly virtual, but we have attended a couple in person of their monthly meetings that they have. We've been able to present the program to these folks because these are the folks that are typically on the ground and actually part of the installation and looking at new opportunities for energy efficiency. And then the other side of that is the business side, quote unquote business side, but we are attending a conference in a couple of weeks over in Spokane, and it's a great group of attendees, but it's predominantly the business and capital investment folks that work for the different school districts around the state. So that's the Washington Association of School Business Officials. So we're attending that conference. I believe it's May 4th through May 6th. But but increased outreach and awareness among schools and discussion within those groups of what's being done at the school level and how we can, support the investments that they're making as they start to plan for getting in compliance for CETA and so many other things has been critical. So it's been really good to have these discussions with the folks in the schools, and we're going to continue to promote that throughout the year. So we're doing some purchasing of advertising as well as conference and lunch and attendances. I think that's about it from the commercial side. Sorry, I ran a little bit long, but I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. I'm glad you scrolled through there. I was going to, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we have the bonus recovery on here. Are we offering that anymore, or we are no longer offering it?
We're not. That was a mistake. Sorry. I was going to point out, you'll see fryers there. We did have quite a few customers try to get their fryer incentives in before April 1st. Of course, if they installed them before April 1st, we can still incentivize it after April 1st, but the installation date has to be prior to April 1st. So I wouldn't imagine that the fryers, which are the number two, measure type for the program year to date, would grow too much more, but it's certainly possible. So
one more quick question about one of these graphs. Can you scroll to the previous page, the bottom of the previous page? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm understanding what I'm reading here. So does this mean that last year at this time you had achieved 48,162 therms of conservation?
Correct.
Okay. But in quarter one of 2021, does that not say in quarter one of 2021 you had achieved 80,477 therms? The number right above that 48,000? What?
That's a good call out. I don't know how we pulled that. It is 48,162 for Q1 2021. I'm not sure what that 8477 represent.
I think that is a mistake on my part when I was creating this table. My apologies.
Got it. Well, thank goodness. I thought I was crazy. Thanks.
And we also, there is that extra one on the incentives on 2022. So, but you'll see it's $101,851. So great. Thank you all.
Thank you, Brady. Thanks, Heather. Appreciate it. Any further questions on the commercial program before we jump into the residential?
Just a question. Is there any way to, the problem with the fryers is just the delays, right? It's COVID and all the supply problems. Otherwise, there'd be more fryers.
The new state code that went into effect does not allow us to incentivize fryers moving forward. The baseline, typically, essentially the difference, how we calculate the energy efficiency and the savings and the ability to offer an incentive is what is being installed over baseline or what code is. And with fryers, code is now Energy Star, which is how we qualified fryers prior to the new code taking effect. So yes, we likely could have incentivized more fryers if there were not issues with getting fryers to customers. But moving forward, fryers are not an option for installation. For incentivization. That's a good clarification though. Thank you for that.
And let me just follow up. And so the way it's structured is you go by code rather than actual practice. Code is code, but code is like an aspirational goal. Normally codes aren't followed well. I've been in states where it just depends on the county. Your code enforcement is 0 in many counties, really good in a couple, sort of okay in others. It seems to me if we're trying to acquire savings, we should be using actual, not aspirational. Anyhow, I know we have to follow the rules, but
Just to clarify, this isn't code, it's so much a standard. So this is like what manufacturers and distributors are allowed to sell rather than something being enforced by a code official.
Okay, I still want to leave this distinction between aspirational things and things that are measured. It's always there. And often you have to be careful with administrative guidelines that sometimes they're more aspirational than they are based on empirical measurement. Anyway, I don't know. I'm just raising that, I just think it's too bad because
if it's COVID and supply chain stuff, then why not just get a waiver and credit everybody who is right now considering fryers, even if it goes in 16 months, because the background is not changing. Nobody is getting fryers.
Good point, Gil. I actually, I haven't heard of a waiver for appliance standards or code requirements in Washington. I know in Oregon, some of the program cost effectiveness is actually waived based on some of the specific measures. That's an interesting question, because I know that this is going to be a hit to our commercial programs, especially the food service. One of the things that we've looked at is there a way for us to address that market? To your point, Gil, there's still demand. Is there a way for us to still address and serve that market when there isn't a higher efficiency measure for us to incentivize? And at least not cost effectively, right? And so there's two kind of angles that we were looking at, and we're still reviewing it. We haven't, pushed it off as a possibility. We're looking at pilots, and we've been exploring with some of our industry peers within the U.S. as a whole. There's some utilities that are actually incentivizing for used equipment, and so we're looking at how would you, first off, you can't incentivize something that was already incentivized, the same piece of equipment, so that's always a question. How do you guarantee the savings? And I guess they're using a certain certification for doing that. So that's the one thing, is there a way for us to incentivize used equipment? An alternative method would be, is there a way for us to incentivize people or do like the buyback type programs that you've seen for refrigerators and whatnot on the electric side? Is there a way for us to get that older equipment off the market and incentivize people to go ahead and put in the new piece of equipment? That's tough when there's nothing available, right? So it's a little bit of in the egg when the market's not, the equipment's not there. But outside of that, is there a way for us to actually provide, $25, $50, whatever it is, to get rid of the old equipment that is less effective, and then have people put in that code, quote unquote, code and or standard that would be the case now that they otherwise wouldn't be putting in if they didn't have to. So we haven't gotten a lot of traction on it. We're still reviewing, these options. These are some of the potential pilots that we've been looking at, because we're really trying to think outside of the box. Fryers have been huge for our programs. It really has. It's a really good driver for restaurants, and especially with the restaurant industry, how hard it was hit during COVID. We were looking for whatever we could do to try to help. And of course, our requirements is, efficiency, energy efficiency. That's what we really want to do, get those savings. So do you want to speak to any of those, the research that we're doing on those fronts, Brady?
Yes. I mean, I think you covered it well. I don't know that we have had any clear vision of what that could look like, especially as we've talked to some colleagues specifically in Michigan about, their requirements are a bit different in terms of what, baseline would be that we would incentivize. But I do think there is some opportunity. I've spoken with some folks at Energy Star, and they're enthusiastic about the idea of doing some kind of buyback program for gas fryers. They've almost done nothing on the gas side for any type of buyback program or seen it done. They're enthusiastic about it. Like you said, it's the, if the equipment's actually available, pushing folks to take already existing or already operating, competently operating equipment and helping them make that move a little quicker than they would have, because typically fryers are not something that you invest in until you need to, and when you need them, you need them. Well, if we knew there was some, sort of end to supply chain challenges, I think it would be beneficial, and there would present some opportunity to maybe put a time horizon on, if in the next 3 months you're able to install an Energy Star piece of equipment and you're replacing a piece of equipment that is not, but that is already still operating, that we could offer some kind of an incentive. I think that would be beneficial. I just don't know when we're going to get, market indicators that equipment is available and ready to go. So meanwhile, that equipment is continuing to, function, but degrade over time, and that that limits the market of potential buyers because again they're only able to purchase at this point in Washington State Energy Star equipment.
Maybe there's a to-do there for us, Brady, by Q3 is just an update on that supply chain issue, and if we've gotten any traction on these. I think it's maybe a one or the other. I don't think we could do both, and I'm not sure that it's viable either way. But I'd like a kind of an update on where we're at on our business case for how to serve this sector. To Gil's point. And Des, if you could catch that, please, as an action item, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you for bringing that up, Gil, and for the conversation.
So I'm going to move into the residential program then. Jocelyn, are there any specific points that you'd like to bring up? Jocelyn's taken over our monthly update that we provide to commission staff, and then she's taken over on consolidating our quarterly updates as well on the program accomplishments. So I'll ask her to speak to anything she'd like to at this point.
Good morning. The things that I would like to kind of point out are we have an expectation, or there is a concern about receiving enough applications over the course of the year to supply enough therms to actually meet goal. That's called out in bullet point 3 here. The trend right now is we're only 2% higher than the 3-year average. However, to that end, we are making efforts to expand our outreach and make it easier as well for customers to apply. So at the beginning or during the first quarter, we launched the new public user experience online portal to changing our current process for applying online to something that is more streamlined and simple for the customer. And we have seen about a 50% increase in applications through the online portal following the release of that update. So that's positive. That's something that I personally am very excited to see because I like to try to make it as easy as possible for our customers to interact with us. Something that we are also considering is just our print ads and that sort of thing through the various home builder associations throughout the state. In-person outreach is viable this year, where it hasn't been in the last couple of years because of the pandemic. So we are making efforts to get people to apply. But I did want to call out that there is a concern that we just may not get enough applications. We've hit 23% of goal so far in Q1, over 100,000 therms saved. So we're still doing good work, but I wanted to prime the pump of expectation. We're aware of this, and we are doing what we can to mitigate its impact. Thank you.
Yeah, to Jocelyn's point, we recognize that if it's trending below goal achievement for the year, that we're not looking at the biennial right now. We're just looking at the annual. So what we're expecting in the first year. If it is trending a little lower than anticipated, we know that there's more outreach we need to do. To that point, we're coordinating on additional, streaming opportunities. We're looking at obviously more just general messaging in the avenues that we typically use, as well as increased outreach, and then really diving back into that in-person outreach where we can. But John, do you want to speak?
Hey, yeah, thank you, Monica. I also just wanted to point out the estimated applications needed to reach goal is based off of a historic amount of therms saved per application. Now with the new tariff, some of our savings amounts have changed, and we are, I'm taking up the action item to perform some analysis to see what that might look like for potentially what could be a new average therms per paid application. And that could paint a different picture than the 3,170 applications that we do need. We're not exactly sure which direction that'll, or if it will move. We'll have some analysis on that to know kind of maybe the expected impact of the tariff change on our ability to meet goal at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. So the tariff change that went into effect on April 1st really did change quite a few of our rebates for the residential side. Insulation especially is really enticing right now. And so, you know, in the past when we've had a significant change, especially on the insulation side, we've seen a kind of a uptake in the contractor realm, where they start, you know, targeting homes specifically. So we're careful about how we approach it. We want to make sure that it's done right, that it's a whole home approach, that we're supporting best practices, that kind of thing. And we're seeing a little bit of interest right now from the east side of our territory on increasing that outreach. So that's something that we're going to be monitoring and supporting so that we can get more uptake for the programs and hopefully, you know, improve that building envelope so we can get more savings. Carrie, did you want to speak to something?
Yeah, thank you. One, I wanted to give a shout out to the energy services reps that Ted is responsible for their collaboration in really making a concerted effort to identify all of the savings opportunities across the state. And also just mention that new homes typically were a reliable source of therms that have virtually dried up. And John did some analysis that was a little bit controversial last year that subsequently has turned out to be validated in terms of the impact of some of the activities around codes and legislation over the past month or past year in Washington. So just wanted to make note of both of those items.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, Carrie. We will be speaking to that analysis a little bit later in the discussion as far as like savings assumptions and that kind of thing related to the program. We've had, you know, significant uptake from builders in the past for our programs and those new homes, and John, please correct me if I'm wrong, but when you get a new home, typically the savings for a new home is higher than like a single furnace install. So when we talk about the applications that John was speaking to as average therms per application saved, average therms saved per application, excuse me, it's probably going to go down from what it was previously. More of these new homes that we're actually being incentivized for. So that's something for us to keep in mind. Yep, John, go ahead.
Yeah, to your point, Monica, on new homes, we typically saw multiple measures per application, which would drive up the therms per application for that sector of rebates. And then on top of that, we even, you know, we've had home certification rebates. The savings amounts for those have been revised since they're based off of savings over code. And now with the new, more efficient code, they will provide less savings. But in the past, those have been huge contributors to our new home savings as well.
Good point. Thank you. And we've reduced our rebate quite a bit for new home certifications as well because of that change in the savings above code. That cost effectiveness threshold for those. So we're likely to, even if code wasn't already driving down the participation, the rebate itself is not as much of an incentive to the builders to put in that higher efficiency equipment. So we should still see some. You know, we'll obviously keep supporting our builders, and we want to drive those high efficiency installs because there's some customers that are going to put in gas, and we want to make sure what they put in is as high efficient as possible. From the energy efficiency side, it's not going to be as large of a sector as we have seen in the past. So certainly not a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. And most of our programs, we have to be very strategic in making sure we're targeting and really encouraging these installs. I do believe the supply chain, and I think we spoke to this in Q4 for the residential, that Trade Ally, even labor, like availability of labor to install some of these measures was preventing some of these customers from being able to put in their equipment, as well as the availability of the supply chain issues that Brady was speaking to. So hopefully that'll ease up a little bit and we'll see some uptake, additional uptake. But again, we're not quite trending as high as we would like to. So we are certainly taking actions on the back end. And this tariff change was one of those things to try to pump up the participation within our program. Any questions on that before we kind of move on to the infographics here? Yeah, Heather.
Yeah. Okay. One of the questions I was going to ask is, yeah, to what degree is supply chain stuff an issue in residential as compared to commercial, industrial? And it sounds like all of the above. That was sort of my first question.
Hi, Justin.
So my understanding is that the supply chain issues are ubiquitous in the residential sector as well as the commercial sector. The trade allies that I've spoken to and the customers that I've interacted with, the impact and the lag between trying to start a project and when the project is ultimately available for us to process, as we cannot process an application that hasn't completed installation, can be so long that it may not even be within the same calendar year, depending on the project type. I've been working a lot with Windows in the last little while, and there is a significant lag time right now with those, for instance. So it is making the logistics of where all of these projects are going to land a little difficult to forecast. I don't think that the projects are going away. I don't think people are choosing not to go through with these upgrades and with renovations and building new homes and that sort of thing. I just think that it is so far delayed that it's tough to account for them right now.
Oh, one more quick follow-up question, and then we can go to Amy's question in the chat, which is a couple pages back in Q1 notes, says the low income program subgroup is on hold pending a staffing update. So I wanted to ask whether that has contributed to being able to fulfill applications. Like I recognize you're saying we haven't had as many applications as usual, but is it also a case that you're working on a staff shortage yourselves still?
So the low income note there is not related to a staffing shortage within the rest of the department. That's specifically Alan Spector has moved on to another role within the organization. And so the management that he was providing over the low income program will need to be backfilled. Right now I'm filling in and we will be hiring for that role. We do have an economic analyst, and I was going to talk to this later, but I'll speak to it now. We've had an economic analyst role that has been vacant since August. We actually have filled it, and we should have our new individual starting on Monday. Super excited, beyond excited to have someone within that role. Hiring is really difficult right now. So yes, there has been some, thank you. Yes, I'm really, I cannot tell you how excited I am. It has been difficult to fill that. I mean, we were actively looking for quite some time. Outside of that, we also are, we're merging with our partners within IGC. So we're becoming a Western EE group. And within that Western EE umbrella, we're kind of reevaluating what some of the roles are. So it's possible that staffing might come up as something that we can reevaluate how to do the rebate processing. We aren't behind on rebate processing right now, though. I say that, and everyone in my team would be kicking me under the table because they've been working nonstop. So yes, we are short-staffed from that perspective, but it's not a matter of us not processing these rebates in time. It's just all the other tasks that we've got going on trying to keep up. Our queue is actually pretty low right now. Yeah, go ahead, Jocelyn.
That was exactly the point I was going to speak to. Normally our queue which are the applications that are sent in that we process, that is the queue of applications. Normally it is sitting around 200 plus to around 300, depending on what time period we are in the calendar year. And at the moment it is hovering around 100 plus or minus 20. It's really light right now. That is a product of a lower than hoping application submission rate, and a product of Stephanie processing just so much. We are definitely not behind in processing. The concern is we are not going to get enough to process.
We have a certain goal each week that we try to process through, rebates that we try to process through. It's about 80. And if we don't meet those 80 each week, then the goal the next week goes up. So we're staying pretty steady with those goals. We also identify, because of what Jocelyn has said, as far as we're not getting as many in the queue as we'd like to see, that we need to do more actions to bring in those rebates, to remind people about the availability, to really encourage those higher efficiency upgrades. That's where we partner with our trade allies. That's where we look at, how do we get the message out? That's where we really look at how do we really support those trade allies and make sure that they have what they need. We can't do anything about the supply chain. So if they don't have the equipment to install, then that's a bit of a problem. But what we can do is make sure that what they do have is our support and recommendations. And that's where our radio campaigns come in. That's where the streaming campaigns come in. That's where, in-person discussions with customers comes in, that kind of thing. So those are some of the actions we're taking right now. We are looking, and this is, maybe I'll be jumping into the residential a little bit more in this front, but we're looking at a potential pilot with O-Power. And I didn't include this actually on the agenda right now because we're not all the way into our discussions with them. But, there's some behavioral savings that we could maybe look at that we have never, Cascade has never claimed any savings for behavioral because we haven't really targeted that. O-Power is really matured isn't the right word, evolved in the last couple of years on some of the offerings that they have and really how they message to customers. And we can see some really exciting things that they're doing. And I would love to try to, see if there's ways for us to help our customers that way, at least. Not at least, in addition, I should say. So that's one of the additional pilots that we're looking at. I don't know, it's probably more than you asked, Heather. So probably went off tangent there.
I wrote it all down though. It's good stuff. Thank you.
I'm going to go back to my residential numbers here. Where we're at right now then is we're about 20% of goals. I think that I'm interpreting that right, Jocelyn. 19.2% of goal through
We are at
quarter one.
23.6% of goal for therm saved and 19.2 for incentives.
Incentive saved. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. So almost 24% of goal for the year. That's not bad. I'm not catastrophizing or anything. It's just because we have all of our analytics in place, we can see where the trends are going, and we know we need to act now to be able to maintain our momentum. So that's where we're at right now. Is a little bit of a red flag. So now we're acting on it, and we do know that we need more resourcing to be able to bring in those rebates, to really remind customers that they're there and be able to encourage it. So that's what we're doing as well. Is what additional work do we need to do on the back end? One of the other things that we were looking at, and we haven't gotten it in place yet, but is that custom program for the residential side. Those rebates that we just can't offer because they're not in the prescriptive list, but they really have been included from the CPA. So that's another element that we would love to do sometime this year if we can get the support for it. Do we have any questions about the graphs here? This is our cumulative therms achieved and forecasted by month. You can see the 3-year average against the 2022. We've got also our monthly application intake and forecast, and that's really what we're speaking to mostly right now, is that application intake, where the trend line is, our 3-year, our 2022, kind of how we're moving along that trend line right now. Our goal acquisition, exactly what Jocelyn was saying, that's where we're at right now. Any questions on those before I move on to the low income program? I do want to be cognizant to make sure that we get a break. I'd like to get through the low income discussion and then give us maybe a 10-minute break if we've got it, and then we can jump into the rest of the agenda after that. But any questions on the residential front before I do that? So as I mentioned, Alan Spector is not working with this part of our programs anymore. He's taken on a new role within Cascade. So in the meantime, Sheila's continuing her role, and then I'm kind of stepping in to help. We've had a couple conversations with some of the agencies recently, and I would ask Sheila, if you want to kind of go on camera and speak to the bullet points here, that would be great.
Yes, I'm happy to do so. So our Q1 update is 21 homes, and we're on pace for about 80 this year. During our Q1 meeting in February, we learned that the contractors are booked out 8 to 12 weeks. So the agency representatives are having a hard time getting work done because they can't get bids for weatherization. And it speaks to the supply chain issues and also labor shortage. It seems to be prevalent, not just in low-income weatherization, but everywhere. As noted here in the agenda, it's a combination of supply chain problems, general labor shortage, and the burdensome requirements from labor and industries that are required for low-income weatherization. Do we have any questions about low-income weatherization? We're doing pretty well in spite of issues, and I think there's about 4 agency representatives that have resigned in the past couple of weeks. I mean, I know the agencies want to keep completing these projects, but I don't know how the staffing issues are going to affect completion.
I think Sean has a question or comment.
Yeah, hi, Monica. This is Sean with the Energy Project. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to speak to the agency side. For those who are on the call who may not be familiar with Energy Project, we work closely with agencies delivering low-income weatherization and bill assistance. And so had a chance to catch up with those agencies for the spring network meeting that we have annually with all of the agencies delivering weatherization in the state. And so Sheila mentioned there being some staff changes, that has been occurring in the industry for some time. I think we all understand that's happening nationwide in terms of an aging workforce. So we've had some change in management, as well as at the executive director level. Out of 30 executive directors, we had 8 new EDs come on board, and it's actually a great opportunity. We have a more diverse executive director group now as a result. So that's helpful. Similar things are happening, within the agencies, and so I want to speak to that. I think we feel like that is the attrition is sort of a natural part of what's happening in a number of industries, as well as I'm getting ready to fly with Alaska, and they've canceled I don't know how many flights due to shortages from pilots, and we've got supply chain issues, and this is I don't think unique to low-income weatherization. I do think though that particularly with the influx of federal dollars that are coming in, we just got our draft numbers from Department of Commerce. So over the next 5 years, we're going to be seeing an influx of additional funds through the DOE program, weatherization program, and that I think will help to provide additional training and technical assistance. So workforce development, I think there's a full $8 million in that over a 5-year time frame for working with partners, including tech schools, community colleges, et cetera. I teach up at Western on occasion. We've been able to direct a number of students from the energy studies program there into auditing programs, auditing positions for weatherization, in terms of going out and doing the energy audits on homes and then translating that into scopes of work. So we are seeing some positive movement there. In terms of production, there's not a comparison here to production from 2021, but my understanding is that we are just with where we're at on track to exceed previous years, 2021 completion numbers. So I think what we're seeing is, while it's still at a reduced capacity, a more steady flow. Generally, we have a workflow system that a home comes in, we identify it as likely an eligible candidate, through bill assistance or otherwise, perhaps a Head Start program, whatever. And then we schedule to go out and do a home energy assessment, where we do some low cost, no cost education, and then do a full assessment of the home. And that is brought to bid. That the bid's accepted, that goes into the contractor's, scheduling. And I don't know if anyone's tried to get any work done on your home through a contractor recently. Many contractors have booked a year out for doing, any significant remodels. And so, we get into the contractor's schedule, and then, project's completed. We go out and do the inspection. We complete the paperwork for the utilities, and all of that that takes sometimes a better part of a year, from like entry to completion. And that's, I think, probably I want to say a fast track, but a lot of it depends on what sometimes customers want to have happen in their home. so if we're doing multifamily units, we have to do a whole process of getting everyone in the structure verified. And anyway, so I just want to provide some context there, just in terms of, I think the program is tracking to be completing projects on a more regular basis, coming out of the kind of quagmire of COVID. And now, we're, certainly hitting some challenges with workforce and with materials and material costs, honestly. Price of a piece of plywood is, I don't know if you've been tracking that, but went from 30 something to 100 something pretty quickly. It's back down. But, all of these things are impacting a variety of aspects of this particular endeavor here. But happy to also answer any questions specific to the agencies if anyone has those.
Thank you, Sean. It's really valuable to have kind of a more holistic view on what those impacts are. And that we had the meeting on February 2nd with the agencies, and it was really helpful to kind of just sit down and hear what their take was. And to your point, we I think we'll speak to this a little bit later as far as where we're at with our annual report. I want to say it was around 8,000 therms this year, a little bit over that, I think. I'm not scrolling right now to it, so I'm sure I'll eat crow later when I'm not quite on my numbers. But I think our goal was around 12,000. So we were, just shy of our goal by about a third on the low income side. But same thing last year, right? And it's really related to COVID, related to all these other issues that are, as we come out of COVID, what does that look like for supply chain and everything else that you mentioned? So certainly we love to see that we're still seeing these completions. We're seeing that we're on track to meet, 84 projects this year. Want to continue to try to support those agencies as much as we possibly can. One thing that this isn't speaking to is, we're showing the 15% project coordination fee. We're showing the 10% direct rate of what we've paid as of April 1st. Those are changing. Indirect rate's still the 10%, but the project coordination is going up to that 20%. So certainly we'll see some, I'm not sure how much change there'll be on the back end for us necessarily, but I'm hoping that that'll help the agencies and be a little more consistent. I think that was our goal at the state level, is so that they know they get, X amount up to X amount per project. So anyway, help with some of that, the application submittal, the paperwork that you were talking about, because they've got enough hurdles right now with what they're going through. I think the other thing, Sheila, that we were going to just discuss really quick is not just the MOU update, but the comparison to what the MOUs had estimated last year the savings were going to be based on, or number of homes, I think it was served, based on actual homes served this year. I didn't put the specific metrics in here, but I thought it would be helpful for us to just kind of mention.
All right. How about if I share my screen?
There's nothing private on there, right?
Oh, no. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, maybe a little bit bigger.
Okay. So here we have a little table that shows what was projected for 2021 and what actually happened. And just to make it clear, the MOU is designed to satisfy the requirements from the agency. It's not something that Cascade came towards the agencies with and said, you need to do this. The agencies wanted, something in writing that said how many projects they might complete and at what dollar level that would occur. So it is interesting because, for example, you have Blue Mountain Action Council said they were going to do 5 homes at about $10,000 each. They did 6 homes that resulted in $101,000. So it's just a little snapshot of how hard it is to predict what's going to happen. One thing. And then just kind of like the agency capability. Opportunity Council did really well. They put 9 jobs at $214,000. So I'll stop sharing now unless somebody has a question.
It looks like you had a question or comment.
Yeah, so just a comment there about the MOU process. So when we have handling contracts and scheduling, work, operating without a contract, our CFOs at the agencies, if there's no documentation of money committed or how it's committed, that's not our our standard, accounting practices to necessarily commit to work to do that. And so that's the reason for having the MOU is just some verification, for the boards of directors, for the executive staff to be able to plan for some amount of funds committed for specific work. And so that's the genesis of that whole endeavor.
Thank you, Sean.
So it's an estimate, right? I mean, they're not guaranteeing this many homes at this dollar amount. It's all an estimate. So it's just really helpful to see. I think some of that speaks, Sean, to the cost difference that you were just mentioning with plywood, say. I mean, some of these costs are a bit more than anticipated, and that's not something that's market driven, right? That's not something that we necessarily have control over. So it's insights. I think, I mean, that's the type of thing that we will report on in the annual report. And we'll talk about the annual report later, but I thought it was really valuable to have Sheila just kind of touch base on that for us.
Thank you, Monica. Any other questions about low income today? Back to you, Monica.
All right. So we are actually up to the tariff update. I'm going to mention this and then we'll go on our little maybe 10-minute break here. As I said, our tariff is in effect. I don't know why I said April 16th. This was April 1st. I apologize. That's an error on my part. This should be April 1st, 2022. Yeah,
Monica,
I don't know.
You're sharing your screen. We can no longer see it.
Good point. Thank you, John. Reality check, right? All right. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yep.
Our program offerings were updated April 1st. Those are available. The new offerings were noted in the BCP as per the new process, but we also have the new incentive sheets. And those new incentive sheets, I provided the links here for anybody if they're interested. We've talked about a little bit, the new homes rebates had to actually go down. But we've got 2 tiers for furnaces now, and we've got a more enticing windows rebate. And this is all stuff that we're really taking advantage of as far as messaging out to our customers right now. New offerings, check them out. It's on our main website. We've got a banner ad that Taylor put up there. We've got, all of our trade allies. We're sending out copies of the new incentive sheets. We send out contacts. We sent out a notification to all our partners. Hey, new offering, that kind of thing, just the standard. But really trying to promote these so that we can get excitement from the trade allies and then also the customers and see if we can get some additional uptake on our programs. Any questions about those before we take our break? Okay. Well, I say let's come back at 10:30. That'll give you 10 minutes for bio break, and then we can jump into the non-energy impacts discussion that Carrie's going to lead for us. This is just kind of a tickler, a start off for further discussions later this year as well. And then we'll talk about our annual report and some of those savings assumptions that we kind of hinted at. So. All right, thanks everybody. Let's come back, I guess it's 9 minutes now. Let's come back at 10:30. Thank you. All right, I think we're back at 10:30. Well, I guess I know I'm back. I'm going to go ahead and move on. We've got our non-energy impacts discussion. Carrie, are you back?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start the PowerPoint. Does that work for you?
That would be lovely. Thank you.
So I will say that the impetus behind this discussion, we were speaking with commission staff last year and talking about what we had done to address non-energy impacts in the CPA, as well as our planning for the biennial conservation plan, and then how the region as a whole was going to be addressing non-energy impacts in the new year, throughout the year, I should say. How are things evolving? What does it look like at that regional level? So in that discussion, we had committed to addressing the non-energy impacts starting in Q2 and then probably addressing it again later in the year and more in depth, but really just kind of starting out that conversation now with the type of research that we have done and some of the discussions that Carrie's had on the back end. So Carrie, I'll ask you to go ahead and take it from there.
Thank you, Monica. I sit on the RTF Policy Advisory Committee. Sheila represents Cascade with the working group. So we're talking with the regional experts on a regular basis. And one of the things, and this is partly driven by Heather as well, and through the WUTC, is what are some of the non-energy benefits that we accrue through our program. And the non-energy benefits are addressed by the Power Council. The question in front of the RTF was, is the scope broad enough? Is there anything that we are leaving on the table, perhaps, that we would want to discuss? And several of the members did express concern about scope creep and trying to focus on costs and benefits outside the council framework. And Monica and I did talk to Jennifer, and I've just got 2 slides here to give you a quick update and then ask if you have any additional feedback around non-energy impacts. One potential gap that maybe is not addressed adequately through, Monica, you had your hand up?
It was really brief. We actually invited Jennifer to speak as well, and she was unavailable because this overlaps with the RTF meeting. But she's willing to speak to it later in the year, or get additional staff support if our advisory group would like to have deeper conversations about the RTF's approach. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you for that. So the PAC agreed that we would have one-on-one discussions, and that's, as Monica pointed out, that's the discussion that we had with Jennifer. So you can go to the next slide, Monica. This is the only other slide I put together. This is just a little bit of feedback that Cascade provided to the RTF, some feedback that NIA provided. There is a third slide that captures some feedback from the WUTC as well. But outside of the Power Council has a extensive list of non-energy impacts. And of course, the challenge is, how do you quantify and monetize quality of life? A pretty profound question, and probably not one that I would be able to answer, but we are trying to explore how to capture that. And so there's maybe almost 20 items in the Power Council scope that talk about non-energy impacts. We did identify through the work of the RTF and the PAC some of the issues, quality of life issues that are outside of the Power Council framework, including public health, safety, comfort, aesthetics, business, insurance, security, economic development, satisfaction or pride as you self-identify as a green community member. And really, through the course of that, there was no clear recommendation, and there's a sense that it's really not ripe for taking any concerted action. At this point, capacity, resilience, and flexibility are already included in the scope of the RTF, and so those 3 elements are the NEIs that the RTF will focus on and try to continue to explore a standard means of monetizing those 3 items. Sean?
Yeah, thanks. Just to speak briefly on this topic.
Yes.
We've been working with non-energy impacts across all utilities, most recently, particularly through the conservation potential assessments and the various assumptions put into those. And so, as compared to the council, under the UTC, we have now, when looking at NEIs, discussions that do incorporate a variety of factors included in the non-energy impact kind of heading. And, obviously those are codified under CETA, which, with Cascade being a gas company, that's not pertinent per se, but I think there is, and I don't, obviously I'm not going to be speaking for the commission, but in terms of the conversations here, there are a number of factors that are being considered in terms of the benefits that can be calculated as part of the impacts. And we had a CADMIS study done on low-income weatherization and PSE service territory that demonstrated approximately $2,500 in non-energy impacts per completed project. And while those may not accrue directly to the utility, there is societal benefit there, and some level of justification for adjusting perhaps the reimbursement amount, or a variety of ways of trying to get that work done that may not be done otherwise, depending on how it's valued. And so just a piece of, I guess, perspective there from the energy project on the how this discussion is developing.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I think we're following your lead to a certain extent there, Sean. The challenge is to find some methodology to be both consistent and standardized going forward. So still a lot of work. I think it's something that we can make some good progress on this year. Monica.
Really quick follow-up question for Sean. You mentioned the $2,500 from that CADMIS study. Was feedback from that study able to be incorporated in the increase to the project coordination fees that we're doing across the state, or was that just kind of tangential to it?
Within the scope of PSE's program, that conversation is looking at, and what we're talking to the company about right now is, and this builds on what we were talking about earlier, is there's a specific kind of rebate amount per measure completed, and we want to make sure that rebate amount allows work to get done. And right now, with the massive fluctuations in materials costs, labor expenses, and some factors associated with how you value non-energy impacts, that creates more flexibility for the utility to provide an incentive that allows for the work to actually be accomplished, because there is a certain relationship between how much you are willing to pay for something and then the likelihood that it gets done, as with the incentives earlier, that discussion. So what we're trying to do in that case is look at methodologies for allowing the utility to pay more toward the actual cost of getting the work done, simply because that is a very real factor. And obviously, if we have more federal dollars or state dollars, that helps to offset any shortfalls coming in. And so, that's how we've run the programs in the past, but we just want to make sure things are aligned in terms of reflecting the true cost. And so that NEI, that $25 to $100 amount was not used specifically for the project coordination or indirect rate. But I think it does, that is part of the conversation overall of how these energy efficiency work is valued, and how to justify some of the expenses in getting the work done. And so it's a different scenario than what we have with Cascade, in terms of how the program operates. But just wanted to provide a little bit of context as it relates to the low income world. I think obviously in residential or commercial, if there are ways to justify creating incentive amounts that drive more adoption, this is potentially one way to do that. So
great, thank you for that context. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, Carrie, I didn't want to interrupt.
No, thank you. I'm pretty much done. I think that the societal benefits can be more acute in low income communities, and so that is one thing that the RTF is looking at. Any questions? Any further questions or comments? All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carrie. All right. So I'm going to move on to our annual report. We do have some preliminary findings here. I'm going to ask John Storvik to present where we're at. He's been doing the massive amount of work on the back end for Cascade. He's taken this role on for us. as far as consolidating the numbers, working on the work papers, organizing the annual report itself. He's actually taken on the mass amount of the narrative and really looking at those numbers so that we have that analysis. John, would you like to present?
Absolutely. All right. Hello, everyone. The annual report is coming up, coming right along as the bullet points here show. It's currently still a work in progress. We will have a copy ready to provide to all CAG members by the 29th of April, which will be in alignment with our commitment to provide a copy 30 days ahead of when we submit it to the commission. And then we're looking to get feedback from CAG members back by the 19th. We can incorporate that feedback into our draft that will go on to be submitted to the commission on June 1st. But just some highlights from the report so far. You can see here our program achievements for 2021. So overall, the portfolio far exceeded our goal by nearly
John?
200. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to emphasize that these are draft. These may not be the final numbers that you see in the quote unquote draft for the advisory group. So this is a working calculation. They're pretty clean. I really don't have any doubts about them, but I want to add that caveat there just for my sake, if nothing else. Okay, thank you, John.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And please, I can really build a head of steam. So I have my eyes on the Teams window. So if you raise your hand, I'll make sure to incorporate anyone that has questions or comments. But go ahead and jump in if I'm not catching it. So currently, according to these numbers, we are coming in, or we came in almost 200,000 therms above goal for our portfolio. And that was driven in large part by the achievements of all of the programs, but specifically the commercial program incentivized oh gosh, what is it called?
Generative oxidized thermal.
Yes,
yes.
It's an oxidizer. Pretty much, it's something used in a commercial process to burn off volatile compounds. And the commercial team did a great job working with Novalex, who uses that, and seeing that project through to the end. And that project on its own delivered the single largest savings amount for one project in program history across any program, and also the largest single rebate check as well. So we were all very excited to see that go through. You will notice that residential and low income did fall short of their goals, and we have been speaking to some of the reasons that that did occur beyond some of the trailing effects that the pandemic has had. Supply chain issues certainly pushed some of the project timelines out, and beyond that, we're also seeing quite a big drop off in the number of new home rebate applications that we're receiving. And I'll actually touch on that a little bit later, but you can see there that I would like to say for the residential program, the 436,000 therms saved does mark the highest ever achievement in a single program year for the residential program. It was the culmination of a huge effort from the team, and I just wanted to make sure that we recognize how big of an achievement it was to get to that point. Monica, go ahead.
Thank you, John. I wanted to kind of rewind just a tiny bit. I think Amy had sent a note initially asking if our CPA accounted for the decrement in the had accounted for a decrement in savings based on the code change. It did for 2022 and beyond. For this year, the CPA that was in effect when we actually did the program planning for this year did not. That CPA did not account for those major changes to the new homes program. So the savings that we accomplished in this year were despite the changes that went into effect. I don't want to say despite because that sounds like an excuse, and I don't mean it that way, but that CPI actually did not adequately account for that impact from the code change. So we were being held to savings estimates that did not plan on that amount of change to prohibit the use of the program by some of those builders. So we'll speak to it a little bit more later with John's survey that he did, but I did want to clarify the note that I'd made earlier to that effect. So yes, moving forward, it has been decremented, but for this program, because it is backward facing, it was not decremented. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Monica. On top of the savings, you can see there the carbon offsets that we've derived for the savings that we achieved in 2021. The savings from NEA, and I'll touch on this a little bit later. If you followed the BCP, I believe the estimate was the savings from code for residential and commercial was going to be around 150,000 therms, and we came in about 80% short of that. So comes in at 30,000, but we'll go ahead and touch on that a little bit further on in the agenda. Moving on to low income, we just have a snapshot here of the spending for low income. So you can see there between both the weatherization program and the enhanced weatherization program, the total rebate spending, and then we also have the project coordination fee and indirect rate that go into that. And that really helps us be able to provide or remove some of the barriers that exist for providing weatherization for income qualifying households. And actually, I do want to point out the 15% project coordination fee will be increasing to 20%. Is that under the new tariff?
Just
Monica?
April 1st.
As of April 1st. Okay, so that project coordination fee is actually increased to 20%, and that actually comes from the conditions agreement that was attached to the BCP. So we're really excited for the doors that'll open for reducing the energy burden for our customers. And then just before I move on from that, Sheila, did you want to touch on anything else regarding the spending there for low income?
No.
Okay.
I mean, things are going up. That's all I can say is that the cost. I've seen a dramatic increase in the past 3 years. So just more of the same. Like it's just getting more expensive to do business in general. So
that's a great point. Actually, to Sheila's point, I was performing some analysis, and this will be in the report itself, but according to what we budgeted, you can see actually the increase that has occurred in the cost of these projects. Our budgeting is based off of historic figures, and for the 2021 year, projects actually came in, I think, about 17% more expensive than we were expecting them to be. And so it's definitely, cost is unfortunately, something that can affect these projects, and we're doing what we can to, help alleviate that. But as Sheila did point out, the costs are getting higher. Please scroll down. Thank you. Moving on, just want to touch on the cost effectiveness. So as you can see here, the cost effectiveness is far above 1. The main driver behind this very, very high cost effectiveness was an update to the avoided costs that we use when gauging cost effectiveness for the program. One of the things that was not previously included in the avoided costs, but is now and will be moving forward, is the social cost of carbon. And with the inclusion of that, it means that we can offer much higher rebates when planning with those costs. The 2021 conservation plan itself did not use the costs that had the social cost of carbon included at the time. And so because of that, it's the use of the updated social cost of carbon avoided costs is really driving a huge increase in the cost effectiveness. Monica, I'll let you add on to that.
Thank you, John. Yeah, so when we did the 2021 conservation plan, we utilized the avoided costs without the social cost of carbon initially. Commission staff had come back to us with, right when we would already drafted the plan, actually, right before it was going to be submitted to the advisory group, and so that they'd like to see some scenarios utilizing that social cost of carbon included within the avoided costs. And so we were able to run scenarios, but because we had already pretty much done the entire plan based off of the previous avoided costs and run, the conservation potential stuff, everything previously was done without that updated avoided cost, we were advised that we did not need to run everything back through, but moving forward to make sure that we were using it. So we had a couple scenarios that did include it, but the actual plan itself did not include the social cost of carbon within the avoided costs. As we're looking back, because we need to, moving forward, we obviously need to, that's where we're at right now. That's what a lot of it is driving at. Devin, go ahead.
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, I just wanted to add as a point of clarification for some stakeholders who may not be familiar with Cascade's process. We did use a cost of carbon compliance in the past, so it's not like carbon compliance wasn't a part of our avoided cost going into the 2018 and 2020 avoid cost. But we weren't using social cost of carbon at that time. I think we were using projections based on like marketplaces that we were looking at in California. Just one as a point of clarification, that the concept of using carbon compliance cost was not exclusive to the 2020 and onward, but using social cost of carbon as dictated by or recommended by WUTC was new and something we will be doing moving forward also. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Devin. I appreciate that clarification. Yeah. What you're seeing here is kind of a transition between when we had done the program planning versus when the actual reports come out based on that update to the avoided cost. There's a couple other elements that come into play here, and I'll let John speak to those, but I did want to clarify the timeline on how that occurred and why it wasn't actually incorporated in the program planning for this. It's a significant, that's higher than we want to see, and we recognize that. So we've taken a couple of steps since then. Obviously, we knew it was going to be extremely cost effective. That's one of the reasons we put the tariff change in place. But I'll stop talking and let John speak to it. Thank you, John.
Thank you. Another revision to our cost effectiveness was reevaluating the NEIs, or I should say the non-energy impacts. And here we have listed some of the changes that we did make. Because we are including the social cost of carbon in the avoided costs now, we felt that we might need to reconsider the societal NEIs that we are using when calculating cost effectiveness, specifically for the TRC. And speaking with AEG, we were able to conclude that it would be best to remove the societal NEIs from our calculation at this point, as we felt the social cost of carbon in the avoided costs correctly reflected that value. In addition, we also looked at some of the participant NEIs, and we ended up removing the property value benefit. And then we continued supporting the reduced maintenance cost, non-energy impact, and the sewer and water usage reduction as well. Obviously applied only to those measures that do result in sewer and water usage reductions. So those are a couple more revisions. And then moving forward, looking at this year specifically with our new tariff, something that the higher avoided costs allow us is increased rebates. And so we have increased rebates pretty much across the board. There are some that went down, but we're very excited about these new offerings, and with those increased rebate amounts, it should help us level out the cost effectiveness into a range that would be more desirable. Monica, was there anything else you wanted to touch on with the the NEIs before, or the cost effectiveness before we moved on?
When we did those NEI updates, there was a couple of different, I don't know if sessions is the right word, but steps that we took in looking at those NEIs. The conservation potential assessment that AEG did for us involved a thorough review of NEIs. So as part of that, we had an initial conversation back in March of, I think it was March of last year. I think it was last year, where we invited any CAG members who were interested. And I think I want to say Amy Wheelis and I want to say Andrew Rector were involved with that with us and just kind of exploring what were we using now, what was the best practices, what did AEG recommend moving forward. So as part of the CPA, we did that. And then fast forward to around August, September of this year, when we were doing our biennial conservation plan, we again sat down with AEG and took our annual report spreadsheets that we use, were the workbooks that John's going to include as part of our reporting that we always do, and had AEG sit down and just thoroughly review based on what the CBA said as far as what savings estimates should be, what those NEIs were. So we went through the entire process of our spreadsheet, really updating. To John's point, where were those participant NEBs, where the societal NEBs, where were we already accounting for them based on the updates to the avoided costs? So we did a thorough review of that process as well with them. And that's where some of the recommendations for the updates to the program came into play, as John mentioned, increases to rebates. We changed, I can't remember if we changed measure lives sometimes, we changed savings estimates. We were really trying to move into alignment with our CPA at a holistic level with the commercial, industrial, and then in the residential as well. So that's that kind of, I know we talked about this before at the advisory group level, but I just kind of wanted to circle back around since we're mentioning the NEIs, and as we do the annual report, that's where it comes back into play, because you're going to see those updated spreadsheets this year as part of that draft. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Monica. Moving on, we'll cover the savings estimates from NIA in relation to code updates. The savings estimate is currently 27,914 therms, and that is across the residential and commercial sectors. Again, these are savings driven by the adoption of the new energy code last year in February of 2021. As I noted earlier, this savings estimate was reevaluated based on some based on a study that NIA did perform, maybe in the middle of. I'll let Peter speak to that, but it's a post-code adoption study, and looking at permitting data, it looks like the new saturation rate for gas as the primary fuel in new homes could be as low as 12%. And then previously, the figure used was 83%, which comes from the Northwest Power and Conservation Council, I believe. This change in saturation rate is roughly 86%, which aligns with some of the figures that we actually saw from a survey we performed with our builder cohort last year. And we found that there would be potentially a pretty large decrease in some of the large or primary savings, primary energy saving measures in terms of the number of rebate applications we could expect to see. I'll dig into that a little bit later. We'll actually touch on that survey specifically, and I think we're going to touch on the survey specifically. I know we're going to touch on builder engagement. Yeah, I just wanted to offer a chance for Peter to jump in. I did see Heather, you raised your hand, so I'll let you go now, and then we can go to Peter.
Maybe can Peter go first? He might answer my question.
Sure.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, John. So the data here, really, it comes from a research that was done with TRC. NIA staff worked on really starting in the fourth quarter of last year, continuing really right up until basically the data was needed for inputs to Cascade and some of the other NIA funders for their annual reports. So this is really like the freshest data available. backing up a little bit, there was obviously concern that fuel choice would be an issue with this version of code. So in the fall last year, we had some anecdotal hints that there may be a shift taking place, but really nothing data driven. That was a solid indication of a big shift. Builders were just starting to build to the new code. There were some NIA staff doing, cost per point trainings to help the builders figure out how to most effectively meet the code, including using gas equipment. So we suspected there'd be a drop, but it didn't have any solid numbers. Definitely didn't think it would be as low as 12% of gas homes. So like I said, we commissioned a study with TRC that ran, the last few months. We call it the Washington Residential Postcode Adoption Market Research, and it was to study the impact of the 2018 Washington State Energy Code on new construction of single-family homes in Washington. It primarily looked at space and water heating, fuel selection, builder selection of credits, options chosen, other characteristics including envelope, heating, cooling, ventilation. Water heating choices. There were close to, it was between, I think it was around 178 permits, I believe. I'm not sure if that's the final number, but it was at least 178 permits with a representative sample, across all jurisdictions, really, across Washington. And we felt like the sample size enabled kind of a significant testing of the measure level. There was also, as part of that, so we did surveys as well as, permit pulls as well as builder surveys of over 24 builders, which also kind of provided a narrative information on, their responses to the code. The big thing, this is kind of unprecedented. NIA staff has seen nothing like this. 2008, 2009, when new construction froze up, there's a huge drop in electric code savings. But that was a freezing up of the new construction, not necessarily building practices, which is what we're seeing here. We think that there's potential that we could see higher savings numbers in future years. Going all electric may have seemed sort of like the fastest, easiest choice for code compliance in the short term for builders. But it usually takes a couple of years for builders to really adjust to a new code. So these practices may change, right? There's a lot of the builders said that their customers preferred gas. So, as builders adapt their strategies for code compliance and meeting customer demand, we may see, different strategies under the current point system to incorporate gas with other measures. So we may see higher levels than 12% of homes with gas. So, like I said, this is really fresh data. This is kind of the earliest that we could have findings possible because, as permits are, the lag of submitting permits, sort of the new strategies, and then those showing up and builders sort of reporting kind of how they're thinking about the new code. Doing it really any earlier in 2021, we wouldn't have felt confident about the data that we'd collected. So we are going to continue to monitor the percent of new homes built with gas. The team's exploring options for additional data collection later this year to see kind of where the trend goes, if it stays where it is, or maybe reverts to some point in between where it was previously and what we're seeing more recently of the 12%. We're exploring some options with the NIA Gas Portfolio Advisory Committee to see what we want to do with the portfolio. But this is sort of latest data, but it's good research. And it seems like it's sort of lining up with some of the other things that folks are seeing and saying. I see a couple hands. Let's just go to those and I'll stop talking. Heather and Amy. Yeah, perfect.
Okay, this is Heather with the UTC. I think this is a John or Monica question, maybe. But in the BCP, I do remember like a very short blurb where some NIA data was quoted. Like, this is very generally the amount of savings we might expect from code changes, but that wasn't incorporated into the target because, of course, it was just so preliminary. So this is just me checking that the second bullet here, the estimate is only 70% of the therm savings estimate NIA provided Cascade in fall of 2021. The quantity that you all had in that short section in the BCP was that's the quantity that went down a whole bunch, right? Okay.
That's correct.
I was having issues with my video. So yeah, we had initially we'd reached out to NIA in September when we were doing the BCP and had asked, okay, so where are we at? What are we estimating those savings are associated with the market transformation effort? And we did have about 155,000 therms noted on there. That was based on NIA's earlier study that they had done based on anecdotal evidence, right, of what they thought. Peter, please kick me under the table and rephrase it for me because I'm doing this awkwardly. But there was a study that NIA had done initially, and that's where they had said, there's estimates of what there was like a low, medium, high impact, and even at the high impact, they thought maybe up to 50%, and that certainly wasn't in the first year. So based on those estimates, NIA came back and said, yes, we estimate Cascade specifically will have up to 155,000 therms, mostly based on code change. So that's the conversations that we'd had at an advisory group level as well. So we put that in the BCP, saying preliminary, maybe we'll have this. We'll have to talk about it with the advisory group and see how we're going to count those savings when they come in. I was surprised when it came back at 27,000. I understand the reasoning behind it because this does reflect a little bit more of what we were seeing. What I didn't key into earlier was the change in the code. I just didn't make the correlation that actually was going to affect the final. I should have, so I'll eat crow on that in that regard, and I should have prefaced with the advisory group a little closer. I did say initially, there's no way we're going to be able to claim all these savings. It's just a little bit higher than we would even think. So maybe a third of the savings or something. And if we get that, how are we going to account for it? So really where we're at is it's lower than that. We're seeing 27,000 therms worth of savings associated with the market transformation. I will preface by saying our participation with NIA is not strictly based on those savings in this year. I mean, that's not the benefit of the participation. That's not the only benefit. There's a lot of benefits to participation with NIA, and a lot of market transformation occurs down the road. You don't see those savings immediately. It's the actions you put in now, and those savings kind of accrue later in the process. So that's not devaluing the partnership that we have. Where we're at is it kind of puts a little bit of egg on my face because I said, hey, maybe we're going to have 155,000 therms, and obviously that's not there. But we also know the realities of as time progresses and COVID and impacts and code and all that stuff. This was an estimate. So to your point, Heather, yes, I did put 155,000 therms in there. That's not as it's coming out. We're thinking from code, 26,000 therms maybe. I'm not planning at this point of actually counting those towards the savings goal. I'm counting of putting them towards it as we normally would, and how John had it noted, NIA savings X amount. So they're there. I still think that the conversation is ripe in the future for us to talk about it. I did touch base with Energy Trust. Peter was kind enough to put me in contact with Energy Trust, and I spoke to Avista and said, when you get these savings from NIA efforts, how are you accounting for them? And it sounds like in most cases they're accounting for them outside of their standard savings. I still think personally that we should be able to count them towards our goals if they were included within the CPA. For this year, it feels like that was the case. Having said that, I don't think that's what we're going to do. We're going to count them outside of it, and at least note the savings there, and then future conversation opportunities moving forward, maybe at that regional level. Still speaking with Nia, Peter, Becky. There's conversations on the back end certainly that we need to have, so we have a little more. We had transparency into it, but maybe a little more understanding of that impact to the gas, because it's the first time that we thought big savings were going to be coming into play, and then, oh, by the way, here's this code change. So really, because it was, anecdotal, that's hard to know what level to credit it towards that savings potential. So I'll stop there. I'm not sure if that really answered your question, Heather, but that's kind of the way that I'm looking at it.
It answered it. Thank you.
Let's see, I think Amy, and then I see Mark afterward.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. This is Amy Wheelis with the Northwest Energy Coalition. Thanks for presenting these results. I've heard tell of them, but I haven't read the report yet. So I'm interested to do that. You mentioned that builders were saying that their clients or customers prefer gas, but I'm just kind of wondering what that's based on. Is that like for gas heating, for gas space or water heating? And I wonder also if, after the heat dome of last year, if I can't imagine that there are very many homes going in to Washington in this year that don't have air conditioning. And so I don't know if part of that is also driving, accelerated heat pump adoption. So just speculating out, I don't expect you to have necessarily an answer to those. And then one other question, I'll let you comment. I know Cascade and the other gas utilities have lowered their gas line extension allowance, and if that's driving any builder changes, if that was brought up during the builder survey.
Yeah, so the first two, and this is caveated with the final report with, especially with a lot of the qualitative, not qualitative, but the survey results. I don't have the final version of that. They're still working on that. That's actually not even due for another month or two. But the the data behind the savings and new homes and that's all finalized. So I don't have as good of details as you're asking for in terms of which equipment were they preferring. But in the interim results, it was about, I want to say, like at least a third or so were saying that it was heating or cooling or water heating or HVAC that they were preferring for gas. And then the biggest actually sort of corresponded was that about half to, it was about 2/3, I believe. Trying to remember the exact number. It was actually cost for the equipment. Going all electric is that was the biggest thing. They said we feel like we have to go electric, and the cost is a big factor. That was a top concern for most of the survey builders, which related to electric versus gas equipment. So I know that doesn't quite answer your question, but I hopefully when the report's finalized, we can have some better answers. So that's my best non-answer at the moment. But maybe I'll turn over to John and Monica for the second part of your question, because you were asking in terms of line extensions, right? I don't know if we got much of that, but again, when the report's finalized, we might see some of that. But that was not necessarily the focus, but we may have gotten some of that in some of the more open-ended questions. But yeah, I don't know if Monica or John, you have anything additional to say on that?
Yeah. So I'll touch on a survey we ran last year. This was a survey that we ran to understand the potential impacts of the code. And so we actually worked with our builder cohort, reaching out and asking them some questions regarding, hey, do you have any plans on how to meet the new code? And maybe let me just give a little bit of background that might add some good context here. The code update, and one of the reasons that it is making, or I shouldn't say that, the reason that the code update is impacting new homes in the way that it is in regards to a change in the number of homes that use gas as the primary fuel source is there was a change to a section of the code, section R406, which is the energy efficiency credit requirements. And the big change there was previously a gas furnace, a 95% high efficiency gas furnace, and a high efficiency heat pump got you the same number of credits. Moving forward, that actually has been changed. So a heat pump is now worth twice as many credits as a furnace is in a new home. And so to actually, and on top of that, the actual point requirements increased. So it used to be 3 points, and you met that through 3 points for a mid-sized home, I should say. 3 points, and you met that through a number of different options. There wasn't a prescriptive route that you had to take, but there was a prescriptive list of options. So for example, you could choose to install a high efficiency gas furnace and a tankless water heater and have a really, really tight shell. So that was one option. Another option would be a heat pump, a tankless water heater, and really, really efficient windows. So under the new code, the credit requirements for a mid-sized home actually doubled, and the credits that you could get from installing a heat pump, either an HVAC heat pump or a water heating heat pump, they ended up doubling from 1 point to 2 points, with the high efficiency gas option remaining at 1 point. And so for many builders, trying to find the additional routes to meet the new code while remaining a gas fueled home meant that they had to find other ways to increase the efficiency of the home, which overall increased project costs such that using an electric heat pump it made it a bit simpler in terms of the design change that they needed. And then on top of that, it just ended up being a cheaper option to go that route. That's just some background information there. We performed a survey last year, and we heard back from builders that represent 50% of the applications received. So not necessarily 50% of the builder cohort responded, but the builders that did respond represent at least 50% of the number of applications we would get in any given year. What we found was that 70% of builders said that they would continue providing gas in new homes. However, the amount that would continue offering it, we're going to be offering lifestyle equipment such as gas ranges, barbecues, fireplaces. And so many of the options that they were going to continue installing are not pieces of equipment that we incentivize. The main drivers for energy savings, gas energy savings in new homes, comes from tankless water heaters and high efficiency furnaces. And some other things attached to that, such as programmable thermostats or smart thermostats now, because the code actually does not allow, well, it requires programmable thermostats in new homes, so you can't incentivize that. But exterior entry doors, these were all things that kind of tied to the heating. And so this was of interest to us because that is one of the drivers for our ability to meet goal, and also something that has gone historically into setting our goals. Moving forward, we are working with AEG, and in the last CPA, as Monica already pointed out, we are accounting for code. But yeah, so when it comes down to it, 26% of our builder cohort said that they would continue installing the equipment that we incentivize and that we claim the savings for. And then just as two key points, we found that there could potentially be a 90% decrease in the number of applications we receive for gas furnaces and an 84% decrease in the applications we receive for tankless water heaters, which is roughly in line with the decrement that NEA has preliminarily found through their post-code adoption study. So,
two clarifications.
Oh, go ahead.
That's for new homes specifically, right? So it's not across the board for our programs. That's for new homes. And then just a reminder, please, that Mark Thompson's had his hand up for a bit. So.
Oh, thank you. All right. Well, I'll just wrap up that part by saying we're seeing this decrement, and it could impact our ability to meet goal with savings from new homes as that potential has decreased. That is what we're seeing currently. Mark, please.
Thank you, John and Peter. And I think, John, you touched on my questions some. Would still like clarification, though, under the NEA section, on first sub-bullet under bullet number 2. When it's mentioned that the saturation rate of gas as the primary fuel in new homes from 83 to 12%, huge change, obviously. And I'm just wanting to make sure I understand what is meant by primary fuel. Does that mean the primary heating fuel, or does that mean the fuel that accounts for the greatest BTUs within the home? What exactly is the definition there?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Good question. I believe that is the heating and HVAC and water heating.
Okay.
Fuel.
Okay,
Yep.
so it can include, say, a tankless water heater, the combined energy from the water and the space heating. Okay, great. So gas could still be in the home, but just not be the primary fuel.
Right. Yeah. Kind of in line. I believe the research that John walked through. It's kind of similar, right? You've got some of the other appliances, but not.
Right. Right. Now, does that happen very frequently? Because I wouldn't think that the service installation cost and all that could be justified economically if you're only serving, say, a range.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And that's, I don't know if John and Monica have any thoughts on that. I know anecdotally we've, heard that there's value, home value benefit to having gas, especially for I like the lifestyle appliances. There's definitely, I've heard anywhere from, up to like $50,000 benefit to a home value.
Yeah.
I've
seen
that's
similar
anecdotal,
things, yeah.
Of course.
No, that's good, Peter. I've seen similar things, but then does Cascade then have a line extension fee, or that those sort of the homes that want it for the lifestyle, in order to defer the system cost, do you ask them to pay a portion of the service installation cost?
Cascade does have a line extension policy. I wish Ted McCammett was still on the call. He actually had to head off, and that's exactly his purview. Maybe Lori or Mike Parvinen, are you able to speak to that line extension question?
Yeah, repeat the question again, please.
Sure, Mike. I'm wondering if John has mentioned that in new construction, it's sometimes the case, and not sure exactly how often this happens, but a new home, because of the preference for gas in some of the lifestyle uses, such as cooking, they will choose to install just those small load sorts of usage, and not and have electric for the majority of the space heating, the water heating, and of course the other electric loads. In those cases, I would think that the added margin to the gas company from serving such a small load isn't covered by a standard line extension policy that might provide the service for free. So I'm wondering if in those cases, the customer in a new construction case that opts for just a small amount of gas load, but yet requires the additional service line and all that and meter, are they asked to share an expense of that? Is the builder or owner assessed a fee for the installation of gas service?
I believe it depends on the situation. If you're looking at a one-off individual analysis, or is it part of a bigger project like a development?
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Things like that.
But
I also believe that the tariff is written in such a way. I'm trying to see if I can get access to that really quickly to verify. But I believe under our decoupling mechanism, since our revenue is really kind of on a per customer basis, we look at the overall revenue from a decoupling standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm remembering correctly.
Mike, if I can jump in, I think it's based on the estimated revenue from the customer. So Sheila, I think, put in the tariff, but it's, if the customer is expected to have like a relatively low revenue, they get, a relatively low allowance, and then there's a cap.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, that's helpful. It's just a little bit of a shock to me. Some of you have seen these numbers before, but going from 83% to 12% is huge.
It is, Mark. It is a big impact to our business, and specifically looking at energy efficiency, these are savings that we're being held to, and we can't achieve them if they're not building gas homes.
Right.
So it's got a ripple down effect, certainly.
Yeah.
And I think one of the takeaways is yes, it was anecdotal from a perspective when you look at John's survey, because it was speaking directly with those builders and what are they saying, what are they thinking. But we had a pretty good indication from them that we thought was going to be impactful to our program. And this is more at a regional level when we get, additional feedback from NIA and our other partners that really what are the permit polls showing? Not just what are they saying they're going to do, but what have they actually done as we get a little further into the year and they're starting to have to pull permits. I know a lot of builders pulled a bunch of permits right before so that they could try to get in a lot of their projects. So they didn't have to switch their processes and everything. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at is now that they've gone through the bucket that they'd already pulled, they're now going into what they're doing under the new process, and it is very, very impactful. So it's just something that we're looking at. Yeah. So.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Monica, Mike, John, and Peter. Appreciate that, and sorry for the divergence there.
That was great. Thank you.
And I had misquoted the tariff when I mentioned the decoupling aspect. It is based on the margins of expected margin.
And yeah, I would also like to echo what Peter said, just that these are, the code is very new and this is preliminary results. We're not exactly sure what it's going to look like. It's an evolving situation. I've spoken with builders who, they're finding all different sorts of ways to bring the cost down for customers that do, want to continue using gas as their primary fuel. I've heard some folks, finding ways to get some extra room in the attic to produce just that little bit of extra room to get their insulation up to a higher level. It could absolutely change over the, well, I shouldn't say it could. It will change, and so it'll just be interesting to see how builders do adapt. And I will say the Cascade Energy Efficiency Department is still working on ways to identify, savings opportunities in new homes, whether that is, helping builders find more efficient processes for some changes that you can do to get more insulation in your walls, have a better envelope. We're looking at that and assessing kind of what we're able to help with there. I just want to open it up. Are there any other questions? Or Peter, do you have anything else you'd like to say regarding new homes or?
Yeah, no, thanks, John. No, I thank everyone for the time here and all the good questions and discussion. Maybe I would jump in with for Monica and not all the eggs should be on her face. I should want to put some on my own face in terms of the numbers the forecasting of 83% homes with gas. I know the team really wants to be data driven and saying, hey, the best research, most recent is this number, and when we can get a better one, we'll peg to that. So that was us saying, hey, this is the best thing we can touch, and then said, hey, here it is, Monica. So I don't want the egg to be on your face, because I know you guys are out there listening and hearing, and but yeah, it's still a big shock, right? So and maybe the last thing I would say, and Monica, you alluded to it a little bit, is the gas portfolio at NIA. It's a younger portfolio, and initially the savings are heavily dependent on codes, because that's what you can do sort of quickly and intervene in the market while we're ramping up the different products, and start to see savings from those as those kind of hit the market and we start intervening in the market. So lots of exciting things happening on that front. This is not one of them. So anyway, thanks everyone for the time, and yeah, great discussion.
I appreciate Nia's support as always. Thank you, Peter and John. Thank you so much for going over the survey that you did, and really that intelligence into it is really helpful for us to have as far as we look at what's that impact and how are we going to address our customer base and what are their needs moving forward as far as that efficiency requirements are for gas. Thank you both.
Thank you.
All right. Moving forward, just a couple other items that we'd like to highlight. And I actually already mentioned this one, but the residential and commercial program reached all-time highs in regards to therm savings incentivized. So we're very excited to see that, and just looking forward to building on that momentum. And then what was really cool, we we found that our portfolio level administrative budget for 2021 was within $10,000 of actual spending. And that is just always, it's always fun to see that the budget that we put out there is coming in close to what we do spend. So that was a very nice highlight to have. Before we move on, was there any other questions regarding the annual report? Just wanted to open that up.
Just a quick time check. We've got about 23 minutes left. We want to touch base on the IRP. We want to do the builder engagement. And I think that's it. I think we're doing really good on our time, but I just wanted to give us a little reality check on time. Thank you.
All right. Well,
yeah, this is Sean, real quick.
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
Yeah, just pardon me. I haven't had a chance to fully review the report yet, so I think preliminarily it looks okay, but I may just send in any feedback over email.
Awesome, thank you.
Wait a minute. Sorry, this is Heather from UTC.
It hasn't come out yet.
Okay.
This was just the notes that we have here with the drafty draft, and then the actual draft for the advisory group will be coming out on the 29th of April.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I just want to make sure I wasn't missing anything there. So I was like, I haven't reviewed it yet. So
thank you.
Okay. Moving on, just another look at builder engagement. We're just very curious about exactly, what the engagement has looked like over the years. And this is actually a breakdown of the participation by zone. And you can see there, at least in terms, so this is as a portion of the total. So I know it looks like Zone 1 is decreasing over those 2 years. There is actually a bump in applications received in 2020, but as a portion of the whole, the participation level, they accounted for less of it. Zone 3, which is on the east side of the state, that encompasses Yakima, the Tri-Cities. We're seeing a lot of activity there in terms of new homes, and that growth continues. We did see a little bit, or I shouldn't say a little bit, there was a big hit to Zone 2 construction in 2020, and from the builders that we've heard from is directly a result of, there was a shutdown in construction actually in 2020, and so that delayed a lot of projects. However, they were able to rebound in 2021, and we're continuing to see those applications come in from Zone 2. And so on the west side of the state, the zones are contributing about 30 to 40% of the total rebate submissions that we see in a year, with Zone 3 making up the remaining 60 to 70%. And yes, and then one more thing to touch on. Zone 3 in 2020 was a bit of an anomalous year. There was a large builder, Hayden Homes, that came into the program and was participating, and they actually switched over to building all electric homes. And so you can actually see that impact. Monica, if you scroll up just to that previous apps per zone, you can see there, I've made a caveat here. There was a pretty big decrease from 2020 to 2021, mainly driven by the exit of Hayden Homes, that really large builder from the program. So that's all I have in terms of the continued builder engagement. And unless there's any questions, I thank you all for your time and listening to me speak so much about builders. All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. It was great. I appreciate the insights on the annual report, all the work that you've done, and then also your insights on the impact to the builders. And we're still getting, builder applications in. We're certainly, we still have offers available for their builders, and we'll continue to work with them as we can to promote the high efficiency upgrade. The next item here is our IRP update. Brian Robertson, I think that you're on the call. If you could maybe weigh in as I go through this stuff, as far as like timelines or any requests you have for the advisory group or any notes, recommendations, anything like that, I'd appreciate it. We have, I think you sent out an email saying that the websites are now updated with current contact information. We've got the IRP schedule, we've got stakeholder engagement documents, that meeting materials, and that you were looking for feedback either via website or email, questions, suggestions from the TAG meetings. We have our, and I included the link to the website that you had provided here. We also did our TAG 1, so energy efficiency participated in that. We do have a commitment as part of our biennial conservation plan to notify our advisory group members of certain elements that are happening as part of the IRP process. So please try to kind of keep informed. We're sending out emails as well. IRP group via Brian has been sending out emails to contacts. If you'd like to be included on that list, please let him know. I think he's more than willing to add you to it. I'm happy to continue to send out the notifications to the advisory group as well. In our first TAG meeting, we talked about the restructuring of our energy efficiency department into a Western EE group team. I've already kind of mentioned that here. We did mention electrification would impact Cascade savings potential across both states. These TAG presentations, at least most of them are going to be both Oregon and Washington as far as the presentations are concerned. A couple of them are specific, but that's why we were mentioning impacts across the territory. This is the first IRP where our energy efficiency falls under the BCP process. So those conditions, we're going to make sure that we do meet those conditions, one of them being notifications to our advisory group. Also, we want to make sure we're focusing on the public engagement. So we're trying to encourage additional public engagement in our advisory group discussions. We've got the evaluation, measurement, and verification that we're going to really dive into from that third party. And then, of course, as part of the BCP, there's an evaluation at the end that needs to be included within the biennial achievements report. I don't think I spoke right, but anyway, that'll be forthcoming as well. And then we also, again, noted the proposed Washington State code change and local electrification through natural gas bans, how it will affect our potential. We've already spoken to it. We're in discussions with AEG about how load map may be able to accommodate service territory specific or like town specific decrements in savings potential based on municipal changes. So for instance, Bellingham has now put in a requirement that new construction for commercial and multifamily cannot include natural gas. That's going to have an impact on our potential in Bellingham. And so working with AEG on how that actually is going to, how much of an impact that will be. And then if that happens in other territories, how do we address that through load map? So we've got a contract in place now with to work on a couple of these elements as part of the IRP process. And then the other item that came up was looking at the new cycle that we have for our when the CPA hits and when the IRP process works and where the avoided costs get plugged into that. I called a conversation with a couple of commission staff, thank you, Heather, for that, and some internal Cascade folks and said, okay, so how does this work when we have our CPA already under the existing avoided costs? Now we have a new IRP that's going to be coming out. Our resource planning team is working on the avoided costs for that. Those should be out in June. Are we expected to rerun our potential through our load map model based on the avoided costs, or do we use the existing conservation potential assessment we already have, which does not include the new avoided costs? So we're still in that discussion. I don't think that we've come to a final consensus on what the next steps are. I did reach out to Vista and I reached out to Northwest Natural to see what process they do and how this kind of affects, even like on the electric side, how does the electrics work with this new cycle? And is it affecting them the same way, or does their CPA hit at a different time where it doesn't, you don't get the chicken and the egg sort of situation where we're at? So go ahead, Heather. I think you've got your hand raised.
I was just gonna, well, maybe I'd first see if anyone has a question about what Monica, about this issue we're working on before I sort of add my 2 cents on it. Okay. Correct, Monica, at least from a staff perspective, right now we're still trying to have all of the information in front of us. how does the cycle work for each of the gas companies? Who's doing what? And then I think the plan from there is to kind of have a staff opinion, which I would hope we would be able to offer you all. If there's sort of a deadline by which it would be helpful, like this is what we should do, that I think that would be helpful to know on staff's end. Granted, like our opinion is obviously not the commission's opinion, is obviously not going to be your opinion. This is your IRP, you're going to do what you're going to do, but I do want us to be able to offer feedback if we can.
Feedback would be great. My understanding is the avoided costs are going to be available around June. Is that right, Brian and Devin, Ashton?
Yeah, I think that's when we had asked, or we said we would provide the voided cost. This mid-June.
So prior to the beginning of June would be good, Heather, because we do have a contract, like I said, an agreement with AEG that they will support if we need to rerun our load map model, but understanding what that looks like before we get into June and the new avoided costs, and making sure that we have time to rerun it to do our TAG presentation in August. I think June or July, August would be helpful. But I think, Des, that's a to-do, please, an action item. Does anyone else have any other thoughts about the questions about the IRP, the process we're in? Brian, when is TAG 2? I know it's on my calendar, but I don't want to open it right now.
TAG 2 is May 18th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if anybody needs an invite for that or further information, please let either myself or Brian or maybe even both of us know, and we're happy to follow up with you on that front too.
Maybe one more thing. This is Heather again from UTC that I would add about the IRP process, and this goes for any advisory group at all, is there's a really broad effort at the UTC right now to take a close look at whether advisory groups are accessible to people who work outside the industry, and how realistic is it for us to be able to restructure agendas, use different language in order to be able to make these groups bigger, and get input that we haven't had in the past. I think we're wanting to strike a balance between, everybody's busy and the work needs to get done, and we have a limited amount of time to get the work done, and acknowledging that we have new directives from the legislature, new directives from the governor about how we need to go about making sure everybody can weigh in on this stuff at the right time. All that to say, just letting folks know in this group that that's kind of a conversation that has come up in the IRP space for a number of companies.
That's an excellent point. Thank you, Heather. If there's specific recommendations or thoughts, I certainly welcome it for our advisory group, and I don't want to speak for Brian, but I know they're trying to make public participation a very real aspect of the IRP process. So welcome any and all recommendations. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Brian. So that just leaves us at the quarterly meeting schedule. Obviously, we've done the meeting today. So I think there's a question about our July 13th meeting. It will, of course, be via Teams, however we look at it. There's a possibility we could be in person. I'd love to be able to offer that. I think we could say tentatively we can be in person. I would recommend that be within our Bellingham district office, assuming that the room's available. I'd have to double check that one. But any concerns, comments? If we did have a maybe even partial in-person, partial remote for those who are unable to attend? I think that's going to be my approach. Yes, virtual will be a possibility either way. I just didn't want to disadvantage the folks who had to actually be virtual if they felt that it was that they weren't able to be in person, and if they were feeling like they didn't get the same amount of opportunity to weigh in. I don't think that's the case, but I did want to be cognizant of that. Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick piece on that. I think it's going to be interesting as we, have more hybrid kind of approaches here. And so I think one important factor to consider is just how well mic'd the room is. So I know in that room, people are sitting across the table or, across the room from each other. It might be hard to capture feedback from folks in the room for those who are attending remotely. So I think that's just one consideration for having a hybrid approach, just making sure there's a system that's tested that's functional.
Mhm. That's a very, very good point. Our old process was to use the call-in, the conference line, the conference phone, and we did have additional mics that we added to that phone. With the new Teams environment, the phone is not that's not going to work, and so we're looking at options to increase the to your point, Sean, absolutely the audio, the accessibility via audio, and then a better camera, so we're not just using someone's laptop essentially. So that is on our radar, absolutely. If we're able to do an in-person, then we will make sure that there is the technology to support it. I really appreciate you bringing it up, because yes, that will support that there is concern that we need to make sure that it's accessible, and that will support our request with IT to make sure that we do address that. Thank you. And so Des, that's another to-do, please, action item, to make sure that the audio is supportive, as well as the video of a collaborative approach to a hybrid meeting. Okay, and then our last meeting is October 5th. Let's just do a TBD. We'll decide later if that's going to be both as well, or where that might be located. So that pretty much brings us to the end of our meeting. Do we have any closing questions, comments, anything to wrap up? Then you'll be hearing from us at the end of April. We've got April 29th as the target date to get the draft out to you. In the past, I have forwarded it via BizCom. I haven't talked to John yet if he's planning on sending out a BizCom invite, which is, you have to go into the secured server and download it. That actually does allow us to download larger files. So sometimes it actually works a little better than if we just try to email them. But I'll leave it to John to decide what process he wants to use for getting those out to the advisory group. In the meantime, thank you as always. I know I say this every time, but I realize it's a huge time commitment. I really appreciate the feedback. We had some really great conversations today about savings and where we're at for the year, and then where we're at for the quarter, and what kind of things we're doing to look forward for pilots on the commercial side. And yeah, it was really, really helpful conversation. Thank you, everybody.